Good to see everybody tonight. How are y'all? Jennings, how are you? Good to see you, brother. We're in Psalm 62 tonight. So if you have your Bibles, turn there. Is this the last night of the summer series? Wow. Save me to last. Yeah, right. It is so good to be here. It's impossible but I'll try to say thank you enough for all the support and all the good things this congregation has done for me, not only individually but collectively. So many of you have been so generous. It's the calls I get from people down here that I don't even know. We got a mower. You need a lawnmower up there? Or we got some clothes for you. We got a car. So we've just y'all have nourished many men coming out of prison because of your generosity. And then just your support for me from really in the very beginning since I started doing this work about 26 years ago, 21 years ago. Yeah. I thank you for that. And the work continues. I mean, as long as they have prisons, I don't think there won't be work to do. But the work at Marion at times, Edwin and Randy, some of the brothers here, kept that going when it was real discouraging and very few in number. And things are better there now. We've had some conversions and some faithful men that we've worked with at other places have transferred in there. So this is a good time if you've thought about getting involved, going in on Sundays to the prison. If you'd like to come in another time, I'm there every Tuesday. A couple other brothers I know are there a couple other days a week. So we've got a lot of work going on at Marion. So I just encourage you to get involved with it. I'm going to be able to start coming down the fourth Sunday of each month now. I've been going out to Liberty Correctional out in the Panhandle, but it's the opportunity now that's been freed up. So I plan on trying to come down here on Sundays once a month on the fourth Sunday. So get with Edwin. The work's going good. You'll be encouraged by it. I promise you that. You'll be lifted up, and we need the help. There's some good things going on there right now. And, what I've seen, I've been in it long enough that you just get ebbs and flows at different institutions. And there's been some ebb times here, but it's flowing now. Things are going better. And I just appreciate Edwin and so many of you and your persistence to stay involved, even when it's discouraging and it's not so exciting. My work continues about the same. I think we're coming in a few weeks on a Sunday night to talk about the work. Is it September, I think, right? So I'll have some of the guys with me. We got 4 men in one house and 3 in another, and 1.5 in another house now. So I'll explain that later. But then we got a guy getting out next week. I'll be picking up. So we've got some good things going on. Robert McConnell, who some of you know if you've been hearing us speak the last few years, Robert is the guy that married Greg Whipple's daughter. They now have 3 children. He's a journeyman electrician. Robert's been out for 10 years or so. Katie's pregnant with her 4th child. Well, she went into early labor about 3 months early yesterday. And they're trying to stop the labor. They're having a little boy. They've got 2 daughters and youngest is a son. So she's at Baptist Hospital. They've had all the children at home so far and never had any complications with the pregnancy. So this has been kind of different for them, but they're very faithful and very thankful to God. And so hopefully they'll be able to slow the labor, and she'll be able to keep the baby growing for a few more weeks at least, and maybe longer. So if you could pray for them, Robert and Katie McConnell, I'd appreciate that. And certainly want you to know that we've been praying for Wayne and his recovery, and for all the family, and just love Wayne and all the good things that he's done for me, him and Trudy, in so many ways over the years. So we're praying for his speedy recovery. Tonight we're going to talk about contentment. I think we should maybe define contentment, but I'm not going to flash up a dictionary definition. I think most of you could use a term for contentment. It's one of those words that we just kind of know what it means. The word I like to think of, and as I've been doing the study for this, thinking about the lesson, is the idea of being satisfied. Well pleased. There's some definitions out there that are lean a little stronger even, but I just think if you think satisfied with that. And so of all the emotions we could think about, probably if you listed a bunch of emotions, you may not list contentment as an emotion, but I think it is a feeling. It's something that you evaluate and you get a feeling inside, and it's hard to describe that. You get it sometimes when, if you've ever went to buy something and it just didn't feel right and you get that feeling inside. I think contentment can be that way too. It's just a sense of satisfaction that you have or you don't have. And it's pretty important. This verse is from Jude in verse 14 through 16. This is what he says. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and convict all the ungodly of all their deeds and of ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way. And all the harsh things that the ungodly sinners have spoken against him. That's a pretty bad group of people, wouldn't you say? These are the grumblers, malcontents. You see, that's the opposite of contentment. Grumblers and malcontents. Following their own sinful desires, they are loudmouth boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. So I'd say this is a pretty important thing that we're going to talk about tonight, that of all the things Jude could list as he talks about ungodliness, and he talks about judgment and those who live in an ungodly way, that the main emphasis, at least in this section of scriptures, is the idea of grumbling and being a malcontent. Malcontent, the opposite of contentment. Against contentment, in other words. So I think we can surmise from that if I live my life and I'm known as a malcontent, I don't have contentment in my life, then I'm not going to be found faithful to God. And that's kind of scary. Because I think all of us, I have, at times in my life, been uncontent, dissatisfied, a grumbler. And that's something that clearly is not pleasing to God. It's not Christ-like. And it's something we've got to evaluate as we look at it in our lives. So as we think about the idea of contentment, I think it's important that when we talk about it in context of the scriptures, we kind of understand this. But what Paul says in Timothy here is important, that we define that contentment in and of itself is not going to be pleasing to God. And so in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, it says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment. So think about it. You could be a content person and not believe in God. You could just be satisfied. You see it all the time, right? We watch some of these adventure shows alone, and these people will get out. They don't believe in God. They believe in God as nature. And they'll just say, like, this is where I'm most content, just out in the outdoors. Well, I believe them. They're contented people, but they don't have godliness. This idea of reverence for, piety toward God, godliness. But if I have godliness in my life, if I have a reverence for God, and I combine that with contentment, then Paul says you've got great gain. And so when we read about contentment in the Bible, every time it doesn't connect it with godliness, but we should hear that in our own minds. Contentment within the framework of serving God. That's the only place contentment has real value. And so he says, for we brought nothing into the world and we cannot take anything out of the world, but if we have food and clothing with these, we will be content. So he's talking about if a godly mindset, a piety to God, I can still be discontented. I can still be a malcontent. I've got to make sure that in my reverence for God, I also show appreciation for God for what I have. And there's in my life a sense of satisfaction. And we're going to talk about Psalm 62 in particular and how it kind of hits on that a little bit. But I want us to understand when we talk about contentment, we're talking about godliness with contentment. And so he sets the bar really pretty low in the sense of it really shouldn't take much for us to be content. Godliness and a little bit of food and a little bit of clothing. He said, with that we'll be content. And immediately I think we should ask ourselves, would I be content with that? If I have God, and I've just got some food and some clothing, which most of us here, maybe all of us here, have way more than that, would I be content? And if so, why not? And what will it take me to be content? All right, let's look at Psalm 62. In verse 1, And I want to jump around some. We're not going to read it straight through, but I am going to read the whole thing, but I want to go through sections. For God alone, my soul, this is a Psalm of David. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly forsaken. Drop down to verse 5. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. For my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock, and my refuge is God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. In this context, what we have to see is, and I think you can relate this because the word contentment's not in this psalm. And so you might say, well, that's kind of a strange psalm that they decided to give Daryl to talk about contentment. But I think if you look what I've got on the screen, godliness plus contentment equals salvation. So now if you looked at it like that, you'd say, verse 1, for God alone my soul waits in silence, from him comes my contentment. You see how that just kind of fits there? In God alone, my soul waits, in him comes my salvation, in him comes my contentment, my satisfaction. You see what the psalmist is just laying out in the first verse? He's saying, let's get this straight right away. There's only one thing you have to be content, and that is God. And so he says, my soul alone, my soul waits for God. He is the provider of my salvation. Verse 2, he only is my rock and my contentment. For my fortress I shall not be greatly shaken. When I hear the word fortress, I'm sorry, but I think of the Superman movies. Because he had the fortress, right? And so if you think about that, that's the place where Superman could go and nobody could mess with him there. Well, in later movies they do mess with him there. But for my story tonight, just stick with me on that, okay? But a fortress is something that's gigantic and powerful and strong. And so think about what he's saying. In God, he is my rock and my contentment. For my fortress, my contentment, I shall not be greatly shaken. Do you see what he's saying? Is David is saying, when you have contentment, when that's your salvation, godliness and contentment, when you have that and that's your rock and that's your fortress, guess what? Can anything shake your life? No. Because whatever you have beyond that, you see it as extra. You see it as, it's nice that I have it. It makes my life better, from relationships, from possessions, from whatever else you want to fill in the blank with. Those things are great, but I don't depend on those things for my satisfaction, my contentment. Now, if we can have that mindset, then there's nothing that can be removed out of our life, from something that's very dear and very precious to us to something that we really don't care about that much and it doesn't matter. Nothing can be removed from my life that's going to take away my salvation, my contentment. That's powerful. You see how that grounds our lives? Now think of the opposite. I'm discontented. I'm a malcontent. I grumble and complain if I don't have what I need. And so my life is like this, up and down, depending on what? What God adds into my life or what God takes out of my life. What Satan adds in my life or what Satan takes out of my life. Do you see Job's wife in this? When she tells him, you need to just curse God and die. You know why she said that? She could have no salvation, no contentment, no satisfaction without what? The camels. The children. And all those things that God took away. Look at the comparison there. Job doesn't like it. He's unhappy, sad, all those things. So contentment is not the sense of I don't have loss. I don't want to have other things and want to have things back or have things that I've never had. It's not that at all. What Job shows compared to his wife is my rock being God is built on the fact that I'm satisfied in Him and nothing else matters. Wow. That is so easy to say and so hard to do. Because even when we say these things don't matter to me, what we see with our eyes is when things are taken away from people, many times it affects their faith. Many times. From people taken away, from a fire that burned your house down, from theft or loss that way, is we suddenly see that fortress that I had, really that one right corner was being supported by my house. That left front section up there that I thought was supported on God, you know what that was really supported on? My relationship with my mom and dad. And now mom and dad are gone. And what am I going to do? So as we listen to this, we have to read this and we say, can I say that about myself? Can I say that, you know what? You can strip away anything in my life, things that I love and hold dear and precious, things that I've worked my whole life for, things that I've slaved to get, things that I've invested time and money and effort into and emotion into, and you can take every one of those away. And I'm still satisfied in God. He's my fortress. And so he says in verse 5, for God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. For my hope is from Him. Again, I'll just slip in contentment there. My contentment, my satisfaction is with Him, in God alone. You see how he continues to use this word alone? It's not God plus. I think that's the way a lot of us really are. We have hope in God plus the good people that I go to church with. This good friend that's been there for me all the time. You see, my hope is in God, but it's also in Linnell, because she's always there for me. And then one day Linnell flakes out. I know you can't imagine that happening with Linnell, but one day Linnell flakes out, and suddenly it's not just affected emotionally and I'm sad, it's crushed my faith. I tell guys all the time, I said, look, I'm the guy coming in here meeting with you. You've developed trust in me. We've developed a relationship. But I said, look, guys, next week I might be in Mexico somewhere. I just ran off and just took off. If your faith is in me and in my story, I have this pet peeve about testimonies, because that's a big thing in prison. And I'm like, you don't need my life story to be faithful. You just need God. Let me leave you with God. Because He alone can be your fortress. It's not God plus Daryl. Man, that right front corner is weak if that's what your faith is on. It's God. And we see that in David's life. As things are taken away from David, we see what? He holds fast to God. Why? Because when those things are stripped away, you see, there was a steel girder under that corner, and it was God. And He's held David together. That's contentment. That's satisfaction. Again, verse 6, He only, again, there's our word again, is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory. Does your salvation and glory rest on anything other than God? Man, if it does, it's weak. We're in bad shape. I love my wife, but my salvation can't be rested on her or anything else. He is my mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in Him at all times. There's nobody else, other thing that you can insert there. Trust in whatever. I know you'll always be there for me. No, I won't. No, I won't. Trust in Him at all times. You have your contentment in God. That's what matters. All right, as we go on in Psalm 62, we also see this is consistent with what the New Testament teaches. Again, connecting contentment with godliness is what Paul said in Timothy, but this is in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. He says this, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. Okay, well, that's good. But we've said that's not outside of the context of God. Contentment doesn't really mean anything, but certainly Paul is talking that way. But look what he says. He says, I know how to be brought low and I know how to abound. And in any and every circumstances, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Oh, he's about to tell us the secret. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Now, if Paul had to learn that and it was a secret, then at one time he didn't know that. What do you think Paul's fortress was at one time? He would have always said God, but when we see his life play out, what did we see? It was not only in God, but in the old law. You see, the law had become another way of supporting his life instead of just God. And so when he was like that, he said, I wasn't always content because it was dependent on other things. And so when somebody came after the law, what did Paul do? He fought back. Because this was a support beam for his life. This was a source of his contentment. So when that's stripped away, he's got to decide, am I willing just to be supported, just to be content in God? And so he said, guess what? I learned that. And here's the secret of it, is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's exactly what David's saying in Psalm 62. I can do all things. Now, that verse gets yanked out of context so many times. He's not saying you'll get anything you want if you just put your faith in God. No, he said, no. Think of it this way. It's more like, it doesn't matter what God takes away from me. It doesn't matter what the Romans take away from me or the other Jews or whoever it is. It doesn't matter what's stripped away from me. They can't steal my contentment. Isn't that powerful? People can take a lot from us, can't they? But they cannot take our contentment. Because whether I have a lot or whatever the circumstance, what he says, when I finally realize, when I know the secret, here's the secret, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. That means you can be satisfied no matter what happens in your life. Now, I'm not volunteering to try that out, but I believe that. Do we believe that? That's a good time to say amen. Yeah, I hope we do. Because if not, what might happen? You see, if I don't believe that, then it's just like, man, I just hope as I go through life, they don't take this away from me. I hope I don't lose this. I hope something doesn't happen to my health. I hope something doesn't happen to my family. I hope we don't have a problem at the church. That could derail me. You see, it's just like you're being tossed to and fro, like James talks about in James chapter 1. It's the idea of unsettledness. It's the idea of instability. Contentment gives us stability in our lives. But here's the problem. And the verses we skip in here, we're going to look at this now. The problem is contentment's under attack. Now, he says that. Look what he says in verse 3. How long will all of you attack a man to batter him like a leaning wall or tottering fence? Again, in context, the attacks are coming against the support system, which is in God, he's got salvation in God alone, and God alone is contentment, and God alone is satisfaction. But now, how long will people keep attacking that? How long will others, will the world, how long will I myself, my friends, attack my contentment? And he calls it a leaning wall or a tottering fence. You ever been to a place and you bought a place and you need to go fix it up and you see the fence leaning over like that? Don't you just have this urge to go over and push it down? I do. Or a leaning wall. That's pleasure in these DIY shows when they're doing the demo, and you got this wall that's falling over and somebody just kicks it and the whole thing falls over. This seems like fun. That's what he says. David is talking about how people look at him. They look at his contentment as weakness. And so how can we push David over? How can someone or something push us over? They look at us not like a fortress. That's how David describes his faith. But they look at us with contentment, with satisfaction. They look at that as a weakness. And they look at it as a wall to be pushed over. That's how those who are against me, he describes them here as his enemies, they only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They only plan for that. We have the expression, misery loves company, right? Is that not true? I mean, it is so true. That people, if I'm discontented, you know what I want? You to be discontented with me. That will make me feel so much better. And that's what David's saying. They only plan to thrust him down. from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. They come across as friends. They come across as people who support what I'm doing. But that's not what they are. Then he goes on in verse 9, those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are delusion. He's like, there's no position you can be in. You could say, well, I'm in low estate. I've got great contentment because I don't have anything. No, that's not a guarantee that you'll be content. Well, how about if you had a high estate? How about if you were, wealthy or had a high position? Would that guarantee you stability? Would that guarantee you're satisfied with your life? No. He said, in the balance, they go up there together lighter than a breath. It's like James would describe a vapor. Our lives are like a vapor. That's the idea, that lighter than breath. You breathe it out, it's gone. Is that what we're going to rely on? I'm not caught up in all that money. I'm poor, so therefore I'm satisfied. No. Nothing to glory about that. I've got plenty of money. I've got a position. I got people who respect me. I can surely build my life on that. No, it's like a breath. And then verse 10, put no trust in extortion. Extortion is the idea of unfair practices to gain an advantage. Violence can be a part of it, but doesn't have to be. Swindling, that kind of thing. Put no trust in extortion. Now, why would people put trust in extortion? Because they would say, what? If I can trick you out of your money or out of your position, or if I can manipulate you in some way, if I can treat you in some unfair way to gain an advantage of you, that's going to give me what? Contentment. That's how I'm going to get satisfied. I'm going to do an end run around you and get your job at work. That's going to give me satisfaction. He says, put no trust in that. If you think you're going to have to gain something that way to get satisfaction, you're lying to yourself. Set no vain hopes on robbery. That would have to do with money, right? I'm going to go rob you, and I'm going to be satisfied because I'm going to take what you have and I'm going to keep it for myself. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. If you get it through robbery or just get it through hard work or whatever, can't put your trust in riches. Do you see the things that I've got? Contentment's under attack. All these are ways to attack our contentment that seem viable maybe at times, but aren't. Now, he says it this way. As I just think about this, what's he talking about? Well, the first thing I think of is, isn't the world trying to steal our contentment? You guys ever get that magazine? Raise your hand if you like to garden. Any gardeners in here? Wow, this is a rural area. Y'all are pitiful if y'all don't like to garden. Okay, you got a few brave souls that raise their hand. Have you ever read that magazine? Maybe you get it. It's called Homes and Gardens. Is that what it's called? No, it's not called that, is it? It's Better Homes and Gardens. You know, the magazine that after I've cut my grass and I've edged it and I've done all that work in the yard, 98 degrees out, and I'm sitting there. We have a little front deck and a tree, and Missy and I, doing our yard work, like sit out there after, just gaze at the beauty. And then I open that magazine. You know what the world's telling me? I don't care how nice your place is, there's a better home and garden. And suddenly that satisfaction I had is just like, man, my place looks like garbage. In social media makes that worse, right? We've suddenly become people that own ducks now in the last 6 months. We've had chickens for a long time, but we've expanded. We have ducks. And so, I didn't know anything about ducks, so we need a duck pond. Now, we've got this giant pond in our front yard, but the stupid ducks will not go in the pond. So we have to create a pond for them. So we have this big thing that somebody gave us. It's like you bury it in the ground for a little koi pond or something like that. It's going to be great. I get out there, I build a ramp for those little ducks to walk up in it. And we figure out how we're going to do it. And Missy gets it, puts the water in it. And I'm sitting back looking at the thing. I think that is awesome. I'm proud of that little duck pond. And then at night, Missy's on Facebook. And do you know what kind of duck ponds people build for their ducks? I mean, rock, flowing fountains, automatic thing that pumps the water out and cleans it automatically and puts new water in. And suddenly I look out, you can see it out of our bathroom window. I look out of our bathroom window, I'm like, man, my duck pond's ugly. Isn't the world always trying to steal our contentment? I mean, isn't that what marketing is? You can't have life till you have Visa. You need a new car to be happy. And when you see those ads and you go look what you got, it's like, I got junk. But the world is constantly trying to steal our contentment and satisfaction. Now we expect that, but that's what David said. We need to look at the world as an enemy. There's these people out there, and they're looking at my content life, and you know what they're trying to convince me of? Your life isn't a fortress, it's a leaning wall. Just go look out there at your little shed. You ever watch those shows? They build these, magnificent she sheds, they call them. And suddenly my little storage shed looks like garbage. So the world, but that's how David saw it. They're trying to steal this because they look at the contentment I have based on God, and they say there's no way you can be happy just with God. They're trying to steal our contentment. Why are we letting them? I mean, do we believe the Scriptures when we say, you know what, all that stuff, it doesn't really make us more satisfied? In fact, sometimes you get whatever that is, and even it doesn't provide you with joy, doesn't it? The world tries to steal our contentment. How about friends? I'm going to give you a funny example on this one. You ever been invited over to somebody's house? I've been in a lot of y'all's homes. And you eat a good meal, and they say something like, did you get enough to eat? What do you always say? Yes, it was great. But what do they do then? So you said, I'm content. And what do they say? How about some dessert? And you say, no, I'm good. That was great. I'm fine. Come on now. You can't say no. You know you want a piece of this apple pie. And what do? You eat the apple pie. I'm making a joke of that. But that's it's a funny way of looking at it. But I'm satisfied. Thank you. It was a great dinner and all. No, you're not satisfied. You're not going to be satisfied till you eat a brownie. Do you see what our friends... Now, friends can unknowingly do that at times. I'll just tell you, if you ever ridden with somebody and, maybe they're starting out and they've got this hoopty car, but it's paid for, no debt, and they're satisfied with it, and you get in it and you're like, when are you going to get a new car? This thing's garbage. You ever told that to your children? I don't want my grandkids riding around in this thing. Do you see? They're okay with it. They've built fortress on something other than a car, but you come along, our friends, our family, people who love us and care about us, supposed to be supporting us in God, and they come along and they say, well, this really isn't very nice. I think you need something nicer. Do you see how even we can do that with each other? See, you won't be happy till you have a better car. Or would you ever go to somebody's house and say, man, I think it's time you get a little bigger house. Looks like you're running out of room here. And we encourage each other to what? Be dissatisfied with what we have. We got to be careful about that. We're supposed to be helping people. We're supposed to say, hey man, I don't care if you get another car or not. This thing keeps going. You keep driving it, brother. That thing is awesome, that car. I listen to Dave Ramsey all the time. Now, Jed, I always listen to yours first and then Dave Ramsey podcast. But people call up all the time, and he rails on them because most of them have lived a life that said, I can't be satisfied unless I have a lot of debt. And it's sad. But even in his way of trying to get people to do better, he says you can't be satisfied till you're a millionaire. That's really an underlying theme of Dave Ramsey. We want to make you a millionaire. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Trying to save money and pay off debt, that's all good stuff. That's godly principles, I think. But that little caveat that if you don't become a millionaire, you're not going to be satisfied. That's a problem. How about me? I'm the problem with my satisfaction. And the overwhelming thing when you read about contentment in the Bible is the love of money. This is what he says in Hebrews 13. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. What's he saying? All you got to worry about is what? God's always going to be there. He's your fortress. He's your alone. He is what provides you with satisfaction, provides me with satisfaction. Hebrews says the only way that's going to happen is if you keep your life free from the love of money. So I just need to ask myself, do I love money? Because if I do, then God's not my fortress. And it's just consistent. We need to be concerned about this because most of us have money. This is what he said in the rest of 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting in verse 9. But those who desire to be rich fall in temptation. They desire to be rich. Why do they desire to be rich? Because they're not satisfied. Into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. Now, we read that in all of us, I dare say, think, I could handle it. It wouldn't happen to me. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It's through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. You know what they've done? The love of money does, it just takes a jackhammer to your foundation of God. So it's not social media, it's not my friends, it's not the world, it's me. And my heart craving to have something that I can touch. I need security in something I have. I need to have success in something I feel. And I'm not willing for God to be that. So the love of money is a dangerous thing. Real quick, we're about finished. But real quick, the other thing is, a lot of times what attacks my contentment is comparison to others. And we're not going to go look at these, but there's two ways that can work. In Matthew 20 is a parable of the vineyard workers where they go out and hire some people, pay them 1 denarius a day, then they get some people later and some people later. You remember that story? At the end of the day, the guys that came in last got the same amount of money as the guys he hired in the morning, and they get dissatisfied. Well, they were plenty happy before what? They compared themselves to somebody else. That's kind of what we were talking about with the world, right? My yard looks great until I compare it with something I see in a magazine. Paul would say that comparing ourselves to one to another in Corinthians, he said that's foolish. That steals our satisfaction. And then on the other side, so when I compare myself to others and I think they've got something better than I have, it makes me envious. On the other side of that, we have in Luke 18, the Pharisee and the tax collector. Again, comparison, but now the Pharisee compares himself to the tax collector, and in that comparison, he says, I'm a lot better than this guy. Pride. You see what the Pharisee had built himself on? His own pride, his own works, his own goodness. Man, that's a weak foundation. And so the idea is comparing ourselves to others for satisfaction should never be a part of my life. See, something great happens to you. I ought to be able to appreciate that you got something, appreciate that you've been blessed with that, without saying, I deserve that. I should have had that. You see, if my foundation is built on God, I can do that. But if my foundation is built on the love of money or all these things we talked about, then I won't be able to do it. Real quick, I'm going to run through these questions. Questions that may show a lack of contentment in my life. It doesn't mean it does. I'm just saying it could. Why has God put me in this situation? Whatever that situation is, inherent in that question sometimes can be, I can't be satisfied unless this situation goes away. Or because of this situation, I've lost my contentment. How about, why hasn't God taken this burden away from me? How could I ever be happy with this condition I have? How could I ever be content? Could I be satisfied? Why hasn't God given me, could be a physical thing, could be a child, could be a husband, a wife. Why hasn't God given me? That speaks of what? Discontentment. It doesn't mean that I can't want things. Is my contentment based on whether I get them or not? Why is God letting this happen to me? That could, not always, but it could be a sign of discontentment. Why is God allowing this temptation in my life? God, if you would just take all this away from me, I could be content, I could be satisfied. Why hasn't God healed me or a loved one? God, why haven't you fixed this for me? Because I can't be content till this is fixed. Can we be content when somebody we love is hurt? Can we still be content? Last verse. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, here's what Paul says. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord, he's talking about his thorn in the flesh, about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. I am become a stronger fortress in your life when you're weak. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, calamities. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. Man, what a statement. Can I be content even when I'm weak? Could Paul be content with a thorn in the flesh? That's what God challenges him to do. My grace is sufficient for us. Do we believe that? That's it. He ends in 11 and 12, and he says, once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God. The power to sustain me doesn't belong to Visa, doesn't belong to my friends. It belongs to God. And that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. Steadfast love, the idea of mercy. For you will render to a man according to his work. As we end tonight, if without mercy, are you ready to stand before God according to your work? Man, that's scary. That is scary. None of us can stand before this powerful God based on what we've done. We all are going to depend on mercy. That mercy can be found in the blood of Christ. You can die and be raised with Christ and have a new life. And if you need that tonight, then you are not satisfied and you cannot be content until Jesus is your Savior. If you're subject to that, we'd encourage you to come as we stand and sing.